How many of you have ever seen a strategy? Actually, how many of you have not seen a strategy and tactics tree? Okay, you'll see a bit of one or two today. Just wanted to gauge the degree of familiarity. How many of you read the goal? Okay. In the goal, so as Alan said, I've been around this TOC stuff for a little while. And one of the things that has struck me over and over again is the goal is stated to make money now as well as into the future. Right? What's the goal of a business? To make money. How long? To make money now as well as in the future. And through the years, one of the things I've noticed is that many, many people make a huge assumption. And the assumption that they've made is that really it's to make money now as well as into the future, that at the expense of anything or anybody. Any of you ever confront that kind of, no, it's not to make money, it's to make a better world? Or, not stated, but a big assumption going on. Over the last couple of years, as we've been implementing things like viable vision and coming to try to better and better clarify and make explicit, what is it are we really trying to accomplish as human beings and as organizations and as managers and executives in companies that happen to have as part of what they're there to do, make more money now as well as in the future, came a phrase that really, and I'll ask if any of you would disagree, that you or your company really would want something phrased like this. What we really want for our organizations is for them to be ever flourishing. What do we mean by ever flourishing? Sort of came up with this sentence over the course of the past year. Ever flourishing really means continuously and significantly increasing value for some very important stakeholder groups. One, the employees or members or associates of the company. When I first started making presentations like this one, I had the word employees, but then I met Tupperware. And I was talking with the CFO of Tupperware, and I was doing some research on them because they're starting to take a look at this stuff we call TOC. And really, if you think about, any of you familiar with Tupperware? Any of you have those? Okay. So what they really are about is making a livelihood for thousands and thousands and thousands of people that are not employees. The salespeople of Tupperware are not employees, but from their perspective, this means for those salespeople as well as their employees. So I'm trying to come up with a word that people won't say is just fluff stuff. Employees, associates, Stephen Covey says you should call everybody associates, so I'm cool with that. Continuously and significantly increasing value for employees, members, associates. Significantly and continuously increasing value for customers. And also significantly and continuously increasing value for shareholders. Anybody in here think that you or your company doesn't want all three of those for your company? I've never met anybody that's really not what they want in their heart of hearts. So what do we, and our graphical representation of this is the red curve of growth, performance, results, and the stability. Now, how do those play out for these three stakeholder groups that we're talking about? I think, what does it mean for continuously and significantly increasing value for employees or members of the company? Comes in sort of two flavors. It comes in the form of job security, right? They'd like to keep their job for quite a while. They'd like to make the money that they need to feed their family and pay the health bills and things like that. And in job satisfaction, how much do they really care about being at work? How much do they really enjoy the company? And that comes from the culture of the company. For customers, it's really what are they getting in exchange for the money and the effort that they have to expend in order to get your product or service, right? So what's the return on that cost for them? It's in the usefulness of the product, for sure. It's also in the service that they get and the degree of enjoyment they get from dealing with you, but the increasing value is really, and it's indicated right? The measure of this one is what? How would you measure whether or not you're significantly and continuously increasing value for your customers? Market share? Pardon? Customer loyalty. Yep. Yeah. So we can have a numerical value for this. Our sales going up. Our margins not deteriorating. Our margins going up. And shareholders, obviously that's the easy one, right? Profits and profitability. How do you continuously and significantly increase value for shareholders? They're enjoying what they get in return for their investment. Very often as well, we find shareholders also would love to have a sense of pride in the companies that they're representing. Interesting. So what do we work on? What do we talk about all the time? What are the things that we tend to work on in the TOC world and the process improvement world in our businesses? We work on process. Right? We work on flow. We've had a lot of conversation about flow these last couple of days. We work on continuous improvement. Right? Those three things, probably not leaving much out, but these are the things that we work on, those of us who are coming to TOC ICO. But what does it take? Is that enough? It's not enough. What does it really take to do this and to continue to improve and to have an organization that's ever flourishing, that's always going up the red curve of performance and continuing to be stronger and stronger on the green curve of stability? It takes alignment, right, with the goal of the company, and I'll say with the theme of the company. And we'll talk in a little while about how a theme of a company is reflected in its strategy and tactics tree. Any of you read the book Built to Last? In that book, they talk about the research that they did in order to understand the difference between the great companies in an industry and the good companies in an industry. What does it take to be far surpassing the number one that far surpasses everybody else and the number 2 or 3 or 4? And they met certain criteria and all that. And this is really very much in alignment with their findings. It takes alignment with the goal, with what the company's about. The culture needs to be very, very strong. It forms the theme, if you will, of the company. Doesn't necessarily say that there is one culture, one culture archetype that works for every company, but every company should know who it is and what it's about. It takes synchronization. Right? If we're going to be ever flourishing and have ever increasing performance and continuously increase value for these various stakeholder groups, it takes synchronization across functions. Right? We're organizations because we can't get the job done by an individual. So how do things come together and how smoothly does it flow when we're going a function to a function or a team to a team or a company to a company? How do we know how to do that? And it also takes communication up and down the hierarchy and across the various functions. Anything in here new? Anything in here contain categories that we tend to bitch and moan about when we're back at work and in our companies?
Say a little more, would you please? Mm-hmm. I understand what alignment is. I know what synchronization is, communication. I'm not sure what to clarify.
Okay, good. When I was a little girl, I played a game with my other friends called Telephone Operator. We would sit in a circle, and one person would start, and she would say a phrase or a sentence or tell a story or whatever to the next person. She'd whisper it to the next one sitting next to her. And that one was supposed to relay the same story to the one sitting next to her, and that one would relay the story to the one next to her. And by the time it would get back around to the one who started it, it was completely different. Communication in organizations represents the same thing. Message from CEO all the way down to the lowest levels is not necessarily what the CEO is trying to convey. And messaging from the lower levels all the way up tends to go through its own state of various filters and political correctness and things like that. So the what we say and what we hear and how we do that with each other is often broke.
Tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Only if you do it in the microphone.
Alignment is making sure that the
It's on.
alignment is making sure that that we pay attention to global versus local optima.
Okay.
Synchronization is making sure that the elements within the system work together in producing what they need to do. Communication is a way of helping alignment and synchronization rather than freestanding. It's the 1, 2, 3 that's causing me problems.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Well done. Thank you. I want to add to your definition of alignment. I don't want to take away from it, I want to add to it, because I also see with alignment, when I talk about with the goal and with the theme of the company, yes, it's about making decisions that are local decisions that are good for the global. It's also about being, I'll take an example from Built to Last. They talk about the cigarette company, Philip Morris, as one of the great companies. And the theme of Philip Morris is basically, we have a right to choose whatever the heck we want to do, even if it's bad for us. And in order to really thrive and, to feel good about working there, you can make decisions that are good for the global at a local level, but not be in alignment with that fundamental basic principle of what the company is about. And I want to include that as well in my definition of alignment, okay? So I like this quote from Dr. Deming. Wouldn't it just be better if everyone would work together as a system with the aim for everybody to win? I used to get made fun of because the reason that I stopped as an operations manager at W.L. Gore was to start a company that would train people from different functions to learn the language of and the objectives of the other functions. I was thinking if they just knew how to communicate, they could all work together. So let's take a test as a lead-in to strategy and tactics training. Yes, this is a test. You won't be graded. You won't be asked to share your answers with anybody. Well, you might, but not specifically what you say. And then we'll take a little poll. Some of the core things that prevent alignment and synchronization and effective communication are because come when we're unable to answer for ourselves, people in our company are unable to answer for themselves all 5 of these questions. 5 or 6, I think I got 6 in here. First question, so think about, and I'm going to ask you to answer it in 2 ways. First way is, think about the answer for yourself relative to your role in your organization that you work in. Okay? Do you know the answer to the question for you? If the answer is yes, write down yes. If the answer is no, write down no. If the answer is, I'm really not sure, the answer is no. I also want you to estimate what percentage of the population in your organization do you think would have that answer if the question were asked of them, for themselves? Okay? So first question is, what your job, so think about your job, what is it that you're responsible for accomplishing? What's the objective of your job, of your role in the company? If you can answer it, say yes. Clearly, concisely, logically. Right? If we're working there, there should be a reason that the company wants us there. What's the reason? What am I here to accomplish for the company? Okay? Actually, before I go, we'll do this sort of real time. So, how many of you were able to answer yes for yourselves? Very good. How many of you answered it relative to the general population in your company? How many of you answered more than 50% of the people in your company could answer this? Okay. Okay. And obviously, those who didn't raise their hands, it was less than 50%. We won't go into quartiles or anything like that. Second question, is an interesting one. So I know what I'm responsible for accomplishing. I know the objective of my job. But why is it that the company really needs that in order to continue to improve relative to its goal? Why is what I'm supposed to accomplish necessary for the company? Yes or no? Okay. How many of you are able to answer that question for yourselves? Okay. And how about for the other folks in your company? How many of them would be able to answer that relative to their job? Or more than 50% in the company, I should say. Okay. Far fewer. When we've done this exercise in the past, usually we'll have folks standing up. Stand up. If you can answer the first question, you get to say standing. If you can't, if you have to say no, then you get to sit down. Of those that are remaining, if you can answer the second question yes, you get to stay standing. If you can't, you sit down. Third, so if you know what it is you're responsible for accomplishing, what's the objective of your job, and you know why that's really needed by the company in order for the company to continue to improve relative to its goal, do you know what you need to do in order to accomplish it? So this is the thing that I do, or these are the things that I do that as a result of doing them, by default, as a result of doing them, the objective is achieved. How many of you can answer that question yes? Okay. And in your organizations, how many of you think more than 50% of your people would have been able to answer the first two questions and now would be able to answer the third? Okay, the numbers are tracking the way they usually do. Although I will say in this room of TOC folks, so far your personal numbers are higher. The fourth question is another why. Okay, so I know what I'm responsible for accomplishing. I know why the organization needs me to accomplish it. I know what I'm supposed to do in order to be able to accomplish it. Do I know why? Do I know why doing this activity or this task or this set of tasks is actually going to result in what it is I'm supposed to achieve? Okay, show of hands. For those of you that were able to answer yes to the first three questions, how many of you can answer yes to the fourth? Okay, good. And in your organizations, how many of you who you were thinking about, right, could answer all the first three questions yes, and now the fourth, you still think that more than 50% of the folks in the organization would be able to answer it? Okay. I've done this in Colombia, done this in Korea, done this in a couple of places around the US, and usually this is about the place where everybody's sitting down. Last one is very interesting. How many of you have somebody working, are in a hierarchical type of organization where you have people who report to you? Okay. And how many of you have led projects or are in the midst of leading projects where you have a project team that reports to you? Okay. And how many of you report to somebody? Okay. So this question is for those of you who raised your hand yes at any of those last few checks. Why is accomplishing this at risk? Right? So if I know what I'm supposed to accomplish and I know what I'm supposed to get done in order to accomplish it, if I've got people who are reporting to me, much of the way I'm supposed to accomplish it is through them. Okay? So this question asks, why in the world do I need to give them any additional detail other than explaining to them what I'm responsible for accomplishing in this department, function, project, whatever? And the reason would be because if we don't provide details, something would get screwed up. It wouldn't be able to be accomplished. there would be, and especially when we're thinking about change initiatives and things like that, there would be some standard or typical way of being, some typical way of working. The common practice would lead us to doing something different than what needs to be done in order to accomplish this objective. Okay? What is that? This links the different levels of the organization together. It links me with my boss, so I know. Why would he need to spell something out for me? And everything else, he doesn't need to spell out for me because I'm a good working logical adult, and that I could figure out on my own, or we as a department could figure that out on our own. How many of you that were able to answer the first four could answer the fifth one? Okay. Okay. Could you see that if people in the organization were not able to answer any one of those questions? Do you see that there's a linkage between the inability to answer any one of those questions and the potential for missynchronization, misalignment, and miscommunication? Now think about the risk to a major change initiative, a major implementation of something, whether you're talking about ERP, TOC, the new acronyms that are popping up, right? TOC, LSS, or TLS, or whatever. Think about a major initiative. The only reason any company does a major initiative is to change something with some significance. And it's major because you've got lots of people involved in the process, or at least affected by the process. What happens when folks involved in those initiatives can't answer even one of those questions? You think the initiative goes faster or slower? How many say faster? Good, you're passing the test. So these 5 questions are what gets answered by a strategy and tactics tree. That's one of the reasons why I think the thing is so cool. These are the 5 questions that get answered in the strategy and tactics tree for all levels of the organization, all functions of the organization involved in whatever the purpose of that strategy and tactics tree is trying to accomplish. So if, for instance, and the main thing I could speak to is our viable vision implementations. Right? If, for instance, we're going to implement a viable vision, the strategy and tactics tree contains the answers to all of those questions for the folks that need to be involved in doing something. Okay? From the CEO down to the VPs and the directors and the supervisors and the folks on the floor who need to learn what it is they're supposed to be doing differently. What am I supposed to do? Why am I supposed to do it? Why the heck is it important? Why in the world is this going to lead to that versus what I've always been doing differently? And why does somebody need to spell it out for me? Okay. This is a picture of a strategy and tactics tree. This was created using the only software that I know of today that helps us put them together, which is Harmony, which I think you can find pretty much anywhere, and the free viewer and all those, you can talk to Alan about it. But this is what I think of it as the skeleton or the basic structure of the S&T. Behind these boxes with little titles are a bunch of detail. In fact, each of these boxes, at whatever level they're at, contain the answer to those 5 questions relative to this particular strategy and tactics tree. I'm going to talk about, so in a viable vision implementation, again, that's where most of my experience is with these things, and Ellie, somebody explained it, Umberto, if you were in Umberto's class yesterday, and I think Ellie was talking about it a bit, every viable vision implementation has as its high-level strategy and tactic, the company is going to become ever flourishing by implementing a viable vision and achieving levels of profitability that it had not done before. And the way to do that is to create a decisive competitive edge for significant enough markets without exhausting the company's resources and without taking real risk. So a decisive competitive edge, depending on the type of company you are, may be different. For some, it may be reliability. For some, it may be speed. For some, it may be availability. For some, it may be something else. I'm going to share with you the strategy and tactics step of a company that would adapt reliability, due date performance, as its decisive competitive edge, and show how these questions are answered at the high level, which will explain what I referred to as the theme of the company. So what's the theme of the company going to become as they're implementing this particular strategy and tactics tree? So, and I'm going to sort of flip around a little bit. In this case, the strategy, which is the answer to which question is this answering? A decisive competitive edge is gained by the market knowing that the company's due date promises are remarkably reliable when all other parameters remain the same. So basically, it's saying we're going to accomplish a decisive competitive edge in which we're able to have significantly better performance than anybody else on our due dates. Which question does this answer out of the 5 that we talked about? Well, this, I'll tell you, the strategy is the objective. Right? What are we trying to accomplish? Now, why in the world does a particular company that's adapting this S&T, why in the world would it need this to be its objective? Why would it be really important for the company to achieve that in order to improve relative to its goal? That's answered by the necessary assumption. If that doesn't hold true for the state of the company's marketplace, then this strategy would not be the needed objective for the company. So for companies who say our goal is to become the most reliable company in the world in our market, they need to have, well, one, the definition of decisive competitive edge is satisfying a client's significant need to the extent that no significant competitor can. Which means that we need to define what's that significant need that companies have in a marketplace that would be served by achieving this objective. And the condition is when the due dates of suppliers are notoriously bad is viewed by the customers in that particular marketplace, and late delivery has major consequences for the client, right? So sometimes companies can be late, but it's no big whoop. Other times companies can be late and their customers have real costs, real significant costs associated with having a group of suppliers that are always late. So when the due dates of suppliers are notoriously bad and late delivery has major consequences for the client, reliability is a client's significant need. Does that make sense to you all? Okay. Is this condition present in every market that you could think of? No. Right? So it's only the companies that are in markets where the market fits this description that this objective would be a really important one to achieve for the company relative to its goal. Okay? So now how are we going to do it? How is the company who adapted this strategy and tactics tree going to make that happen at a high level? Well, the company needs to become remarkably good at meeting its promised due dates, and they'll offer a penalty per time period whenever they're late. Okay, it goes on to describe what are hefty penalties, right? So how do you make that happen? How do you accomplish the decisive competitive edge based on due date performance? Well, you need to have a market that needs it, and you need to have an offer that hits on that spot on. Okay? Why the penalty? Well, promises are cheap. So in this kind of company, putting some money to back themselves up lets the customers know that they really mean what they say. We could get into all sorts of details, but that's not the purpose of this session. Just wanted to explain. So this is the objective, why the objective is important. What are we going to do at a high level? We're only at level 2 here in the strategy and tactics tree, what the company needs to do and why doing this will accomplish that. Now we've got the warning, right? So why can't the company stop right here? Say, this is all we need to do. Folks, go forth and make it happen. Well, what would be the difficulty? Building a decisive competitive edge isn't easy. Some of you who are in the room have had experience with that. Building the capabilities to capitalize on it is not less difficult. Those of you who are involved in helping people change how they market and sell know that that's not just a piece of cake. But sustaining. And Ellie talked about this the other day, I think, for those of you who were here in Saturday's upgrade. Sustaining it is the real challenge. Okay, so once you get there, remember, if what we're talking about is really ever flourishing, we want a company that's continuously and significantly increasing value for shareholders, customers, and employees, we've got to sustain the decisive competitive edge as well. So if we're really good at selling, we're going to pile it on operations. But if we're always going to be on time, operations needs to keep performing. So how do we keep those parts of the company continuously in sync? Okay, and I think, yep. Does this show up? Yeah. Why is it accomplishing it at risk without providing another level of detail? Okay. Yep. It says, this is why we better explain some more about how we're going to make this happen. Make sense?
Ellie said that this warning, the sufficiency assumption, is that if you ignore it, and it is something that you are likely to ignore, that you will fail to achieve the objective.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And so, absolutely. And so to go back up there, think about this statement and how likely it is companies would ignore one of those three components. I'll give you an example. And throughout my 20-year history, an example is all the drum buffer rope implementations I've been involved in. How many companies have actually built a decisive competitive edge with their drum buffer rope implementation? It's thousands and thousands and thousands. How many of them have capitalized on that decisive competitive edge? Okay, so yeah. We can't build it and they will come, and once we build it and we know how to make them come and get it, we better make sure that we're sustaining it as well. Thanks for the added clarity. So now, if you remember, the S&T had the original picture of the strategy and tactics tree I had in here. Now I'm going to go down a few levels. The very top level is the viable vision. The next level is the reliability competitive edge. When I talk a little bit about the theme of the company, companies we're working with, when they make the decision, for instance, to make reliability their decisive competitive edge, the entire company becomes about reliability. That's the mantra of the entire company. We are on time, we deliver on our promise. It's amazing how you see people holding their head up high when they know what the company is trying to achieve, and they can link up with that. They'll do whatever they can. They'll do whatever they can. One of the reasons I wanted to show that to you is because even if we didn't pay heed to the warning, and we just said, this is what we're about, we want to figure out how to make it happen. Once people know, once they understand that's what we're trying to achieve, that's what we're trying to become, you find alignment starting to happen right away. Now we go down a few levels, and at every level it provides a piece of the detail. And what I'd like to do is go from the top reliability down to what we call level 5, which is the nitty-gritty implementation level. Just to show you that how you can take these and go from high level, like we're going to achieve a viable vision, we're going to become extremely reliable on, down to now, what does Brad need to do on his shop floor in order to really contribute to making this happen? And so we're going to take a look at What do we do in a reliability implementation? We get remarkable due date performance. I think, let me take a look. Look at getting excellent reliability, due date performance. We need to sell it. We need to continue to monitor the capacity and things like that. I'm diving down into the very first steps of what we do in order to start bringing on-time performance to shoot it sky high. So the very first thing that would happen is we're going to do what we call choke the release. Anybody familiar with that term? Okay. Anybody unfamiliar with that term? Okay, there's a few hands. So choking the release basically means take off the floor, move away the work in process that's flooding the floor. So cut the work in process and start releasing work into the factory or into production in accordance with its rate of moving it out of production. Okay, so lowering the water so that we could get a better flow. So some of the first thing we do is we define the production buffers. The next thing we do is we generate a release schedule. So now that we've got the floor cleaned up, how do we know when we're going to be releasing things to the floor? The third thing we need to do is help people understand how to follow the release schedule and why it's important. And the fourth thing is, what do we do about excessive WIP that's already out there? So I just picked one, just because I wanted to show what a level of detail looks like. And I'm not going to go through all the words on here because you can see there's more words in the boxes at level 5 than there is at level 2. But I want you to see that there is an instruction set. What's the strategy of this particular third thing that we're going to do in the implementation? Make sure that the release schedule is effectively followed and complied with. What's the tactic? What are we going, and why is it so important that we make that claim as an objective of operations? Because otherwise they'd run to local efficiencies. They would continue to run to local efficiencies. Otherwise, right? Otherwise, if we don't do something, we know that people would follow their old ways. One of the things we know is that when you start to choke material from going in, one of the reasons why we end up with too much work in process on the shop floor is because we've let too much work in process get started. So when we stop starting too much work, it's going to appear to the production floor that there may not be enough work to work on. And if they're concerned about job security and nobody tells them anything, what's going to happen? We'll stretch out the work. Feed my family or make stuff go through fast. Guess what? Feed my family comes first. So we have to help them understand why seeing what's going to change, why that will be good for them and what to expect. So the tactic is we explain to the folks in operations what the effect of the new release schedule is going to be. And then we release orders accordingly. When they understand the parallel assumptions, if you want to read all the detail, the parallel assumptions explain that when folks understand, it's likely that they'll comply because they could see the logic of it and they understand the benefit. Going back to the whole communication thing, Alan, right? What do we communicate? How do we communicate it? I wanted to, I'll show you. I'll share a little story with you shortly. So what's happened since we started using strategy and tactics trees in our implementations? I'm going to share a couple of examples with you. The first example is actually something that was presented here last year, or the year before, I don't remember which. And the graph shows what happened with a metric that we in the States call throughput dollar days, but if you were in India, they would call throughput rupee days. It measures every order, the value of that order, and multiplied by how many days late it is. Which means the higher the number, the worse shape you're in. The lower the number, the better shape you're in. This is an implementation that had been going on for a year or two before this chart was ever created. This, I think it's December, January at that point. That's when they started using a strategy and tactics tree. We hadn't used these in our implementations for the first several years of Viable Vision implementations. We reached a point where we said, you know what? In all our history, TOC has worked. It's worked like a charm. You put something in, you get results right away. Why isn't it happening with Viable Vision implementations? Guess what? We didn't have the alignment, synchronization, and all of that put together for something as massive, as all-encompassing, is a holistic implementation that's not a functional implementation. So we started introducing the S&Ts into our implementations. This represents when this company put the S&T in. See this performance back here? Now, Ellie said, Lisa, you should have gotten the graph from the year before this, from before they started, because it would show you how awful it really was before that. So the numbers were... but this, I think, is telling enough. Company that had already been achieving something, and it dropped like a stone. And they're still sustaining this level of performance. Not true anymore? Who's got the mic?
Listen, Lee, if you would have started it 2 years before that, and you would have put the graph, it would have looked exactly like that. In other words, relative to the chaos that was before, this was fantastic. But as you improve, you want better, okay? This looks fantastic. If you now take and change the scale again, this does not look so fantastic anymore. Fellas, it happened again. This time what we put in
Was Poogie?
wasn't the Poogie. It was the protective capacity there. The blue, the light blue.
Thank you.
In other words, now when you look at the graphs, this becomes this, simply the scale is much bigger, and again the same. In other words,
Yep.
Say what you did again on the louder.
If you look here on the numbers, okay, these numbers are oscillating around 35, okay? So now let's increase the scale and put that not 900, but 50, okay? And you get the same picture. They are now at the 4, 5 level.
And what did they do?
The light blue.
Now,
I didn't.
what happened, the next level of performance was an upgrade to their particular strategy and tactics tree. We don't need to go there. Okay. You guys want the 2 minutes to hear about light blue? Okay.
Look, as you all well know, once you move to make to availability, you must have protective capacity. Okay? Everybody know that? Fine. If you don't, really read what is in the public domain. You must have protective capacity. Now, you are in a steel industry. In the steel industry, you have to really bring yourself into that particular environment. There are two things in the steel industry which are different than a conventional industry. One is how much the resources, the machine cost. For example, if you're in a regular industry and here is a piece of equipment that costs $3 million, that's very expensive. In the steel industry, how much costs a piece of equipment? 300 million. Okay? So this is 2 orders of magnitude more in terms of how much money goes into the machines. The machine here is a furnace, okay? This is minimum $300 million. The second thing is, as you all know, steel industry is a V-shape, but not like other things. You can sell to the outside world the products at each stage. And because of it, the mentality of full utilization of equipment is like breathing air for them. Okay? Do you understand why? Okay? From one hand side, it's so unbelievably expensive. From the other hand side, you can sell. So over there to come and talk about protective capacity is against all their nature. We had to find a solution how to have protective capacity while having 100% utilization. Okay? And we found it. And the solution is called light blue. And for that, go and learn.
Now they're really going to be their minds on the rest of this presentation. That was a picture of a company where we implemented the S&T, and like that, they got the results that were called for by the S&T. Now I'm going to show you the results of some earlier results of a company that started with an S&T at the very beginning of their process. This company actually just made a public presentation, so I can say that it's Dr. Reddy's Labs, another Indian company, a pharmaceutical company. And within the first 4 months of the implementation, I didn't pull his one-year results when I saw him in Florida, but the first 4 months of the implementation, all their plants, and I believe they have a dozen or 13 plants around the world, were on drum buffer, rope buffer management and into replenishment. Their stockouts went from 30% to less than 1%. They found 2 times more capacity than what they thought they had in the first place, within 4 months' time. Sales within the first 4 months of the implementation had already gone to all 1,900 of their distributors in India, many of their other distributors around the world, and their offer was accepted, they thought, unfortunately, by all of them. They were hoping that their offer would be rejected by some so that they could start make things easier, but that didn't happen.
Out of 912, only 907.
Okay. In R&D, their due date performance within the first 4 months of the implementation, and R&D had a hiccup and took longer by 3 weeks getting rolling than they should have, which was a result of some of us ignoring what was on the S&T or adding to it in our minds. Due date performance of projects increased by 20 to 63%, from 20% to 63% at that time. Today it is far, far better than that. And they were completing projects at 2 times the rate that they did before. My understanding is that they've had several first to file in the last several months, which, if you're familiar at all with the pharmaceutical industry, whether you're the brand or whether you're the generic, the first to file gets many months of protected markets. So being first to file is huge. Since Ellie, they presented their 1-year results, but they've already had a couple of points movement in the right way on their profitability. They've already had significant increase in sales. Here, I knew he was good. We'll let Ellie give the update.
Fellas, get used to it. Nothing is good enough. Shall I repeat again? Nothing is good enough. Always keep on thinking. Here's a perfect example. They are moving and getting the result in an unprecedented rate relative to anything that we had before. Is it good enough? No. For example, and this is what I want you to understand, to what extent you have to keep on thinking all the time. I was there, I looked, yes, the results are better than we expected, simply because we extrapolated from the days before you had the S&T and before you started with a full consensus of top management. But due to that, we have overlooked something. So next month, all their top guys, including the CEO, are coming to me to Holland for 4 days retreat. I forgot a whole part of the tree, which will dwarf everything that they've done so far. But this, what they've done, have created a new environment that now it's obvious what the next step and the next step now is by far better than what we thought before. We are changing the tree. Fellas, the tree is not holy. In other words, we have replaced the right side of the tree. We are going to replace with something else because it's about 50 times better than what we had before. But this means back to the drawing board, take the best people, think it good, you are not John Wayne, nobody's John Wayne, don't shoot from the hip. But if you want to do something, modify the tree itself. And what I want to tell you is to what extent when you are doing that, keep an open mind. Maybe the tree itself, not just some tweaks on it, but the whole section, huge section of the tree has to be replaced because now your understanding of what's possible, your understanding of the reality is so much better. Don't block yourself. That's the real impressive thing here.
You weren't expecting a tag team. The thing I wanted to point out with this and with the other, mainly with this implementation, is that one of the big lessons that we've learned from using a strategy and tactics tree is that when we take it one step at a time, so you remember the step that I showed you, this way low at level 5 step. Each of those steps are pretty finite in giving us instruction on what to do and why to do it and what are the assumptions associated with it. Very often, it's easy, especially if you've been through reading the whole tree, thinking, well, let's take our time and do these 5 steps, and then we'll move. We have found that doing that only serves to lengthen the amount of time that the implementation takes, lengthen the amount of time for results to come, and confuse everybody if the results don't come because you're doing 5 things instead of 1. How do you know what was really the cause of what's happening? So we've established a little mantra in Gold Rat Group that talks about the sprint marathon. Sprint marathon might sound like an oxymoron, but sprint marathon. We take one level 5 step and we do it and we see that we've done it and we get the results that we're expecting from it, and then we do the next one. And then we do the next one, and then we do the next one. That's how this implementation was approached.
One step at a time. One step at a time. Nobody is working on 2 steps.
There are so many positive effects to this. One is reduction in multitasking. Another is, as I mentioned, we can much more. And more importantly, so I'm speaking as a consultant, my client, where the knowledge needs to be transferred, where I want them to be able to take this and be on their own. They understand the cause and effect because they're experiencing it. It's not a mishmash. It's not just doing what the consultants told us to do, it's doing because we understand this cause and effect. Now we're doing it, we're experiencing it. And you can go so much faster. Whoever would have thought we'd get 12.5 plants implemented in 4 months? Whoever thought we'd get hundreds and hundreds of offers delivered and pilots starting within 4 months? Henry? Yes.
Dr. Reddy's, you took the step that was operational first, but were you not?
Good question.
Sales step at the same time to get
Yes, yes, yes. 1 step per yeah. Yes, yes.
Production works on something doesn't mean that sales cannot
Yeah.
work on something else.
Yeah.
But production will not work on 2 things together. Sales will not work on 2 things together.
Yeah.
1 step at a time.
Yeah. And in the tree, right, because we're also talking about synchronization, in a well-written S&T, you'll also see where they link up. So yes, sales is doing what they need to do, production is doing what they need to do, but guess what? There needs to be signals in the tree that tells us When can sales really go out and launch the offer on a full scale? When can sales really go out and start offering shorter lead times if you're moving toward rapid response? So when should operations increase the lead time a bit, and how to communicate that to sales? So you need to find the linkage as well as enable people to work in parallel on the things that they could work in parallel. The S&T is emerging with a variety of uses. Ellie talked on Saturday. How many of you were here Saturday for the upgrade? Okay, most of you. Remember the discussion on the engines of disharmony? Let me ask you a question. You see how the questions that are answered in the S&T can help us deal with some of those engines of disharmony? Now just imagine if you were to take the org chart of your organization and turn it into a logical org chart where the layers and the functions and the hierarchy in each of those boxes, you had the answer to those 5 questions. Okay, so not the S&T of an implementation, which is what I've been showing you, but the S&T of the organizational structure. What do you think might happen? If you were able to view the org chart of your organization, and in each of the boxes was a step that contained the answers to all 5 of those questions.
2 things. The first obvious thing is that every part of the organization would understand its place and its relationship to the other parts of the organization. The second thing is there might be some things that don't fit.
And what would you do with it? So you see that, what do you do about it then?
Are they not hidden capacity for something entirely different?
Very good. So you could, if you see the problem, right? One is you have an S&T that shows the logic of every single function of the company, then yes, everybody has an opportunity to know, why am I here? What am I supposed to accomplish? Why am I supposed to accomplish it? If you remember, the opposite of that is the first engine of disharmony. The second one is you make the S&T available to the whole organization, then they know why, then I know what you're here for. Guess what? I have an opportunity to eliminate that particular engine of disharmony, and you brought up a couple other things. We might find that there's some functions, the inertia piece, might find there's some functions that had a great purpose before, but what they were there to solve has been solved long ago, and they're redundant. It's inertia. The only reason that part of the organization is there is inertia. How do you think those folks feel who are in that part of the organization? Think they don't know it? So let's figure out what those are and help put them in roles where they can be directly tied to what the company is trying to accomplish. The other thing that we think we'll find as we do more and more of these are what are the inherent systemic conflicts. When, as Ellie mentioned the other day, we're asking you to do one thing and also the opposite. Or we're asking you to do one thing and we're asking you to do exactly the opposite. If we can surface those things and find them, we're human beings, we have brains, we have hearts, we have an opportunity to solve them. If we don't find them, we don't get to solve them. Mm-hmm.
If we have a conflict, as a matter of fact, who doesn't, okay, in the organization, then it must be that as you dive deep enough and you reach the level which is under the conflict, you will find in that level you have to do that. And nearby it, you will find you have to do the opposite of that. But then, if you go one level above it, you will find why you have to do that and why you have to do that. In other words, at the level of the action, you will find D and D prime. One level above it, you have B and C. One level above that, you have A. In other words, the cloud is shouting from the tree. And now, when it's so explicit, management will be demanded, now sort it out. This is a huge contribution that was shown to us 3 years ago by Alan Bernard. So all the credit goes there. Okay? He was vividly showing this type of things and how they're coming out from the tree. Okay? No. When was it? So that was in Cambridge. This was, sorry, you're right. It's 6 years ago. Unbelievable. Okay? Which means if we write not the transformation tree, all the SNTs that we put in the public domain are transformation trees. And over there in transformation tree, in level 2, what do you see? Build this decisive edge, okay? Build this decisive edge. But instead of transformation tree, let's talk about institutionalized trees. In other words, the tree of the organization. So in level 2, each vice president that report to the president has to have a box, correct? Does he have anything of meaningful to do? Hopefully, otherwise why is there? Fellas, our organizations are 99% correct. So it will be much, much easier to write organizational S&T trees than transformation S&T trees where you have to invent. Okay? But what is happening, it's removing the engines of disharmony. First of all, each one knows now what is really contributing. Each one knows now how his friend is contributing. All the conflicts are highlighted and removed. All the things which are from inertia are highlighted by the tree. I cannot plug it in. So stop to do them. And the fifth engine of disharmony is something that we talked a long time ago. We have a very good tool for it. Hopefully now, because of it, it will be more encouraged to use it. And I'm talking about gaps between responsibility and authority. The lieutenant cloud technique works perfectly. But now, hopefully, companies will start to use it. This is not where to start. If you start with that, you will institutionalize the mistakes. And that's why I'm saying the place to do it is after you build. Capitalize, sustain, now. That's the time to do the institutionalize. That's the time to write the tree. And by that, you clean out all the residual conflicts, all the inertia. You really create a new culture. The culture of people motivated, collaboration, synchronization, so on. What we see already from like implementation of CCPM, you put CCPM in place, and all of a sudden you get people more motivated, you get synchronization between functions. This is just because the CCPM have eliminated some of the conflicts. In other words, the CCPM itself took out some of the engines of disharmony. Can you imagine what happens when you take them all? On top of it, Lisa, this is news for you as well. This morning, in the presentation here, I've realized how stupid I am, because I've realized that I was complaining for so long on some things that I shouldn't have, which is CCPM is only for execution. What about planning the project? And today's presentation have so vividly showed me the way to plan a project is through the S&T. It solves all the problems of planning. It's unbelievable. How could I be so blind? It shows you how stupid I am. Now extrapolate from me to you.
I wanted to share with you an email that I received a couple weeks ago. All of us in GC received from my counterpart in Japan, Yuji Kishira. Ellie conducted a 3-day workshop, and part of that is this exercise that we did earlier with the can you answer each of these 5 questions. This company went back, left the workshop, and a short while later, within a few weeks, this email was sent to Yuji. And it's exactly word for word, so there's a little bit of accent in there too. Retailer in Japan. We started to view all things different ways to see the real essences in business and personal life. More importantly, We are using 5 questions of S&T tree all the time to communicate up and down and across the organization. It amazingly works well. Initially, it was really tough to think, but once we get used to it, we are amazed how much faster we can drive all stakeholders of the project holistically to the same direction. This is our valuable asset of life. So what I want to leave you with is the encouragement that if you take nothing else, take those 5 questions and start using them and start communicating with them. Start the building blocks, and it appears to be extremely, extremely helpful. And that's it. I think we have 5 minutes for questions.